100 miles north of Hawaii, the Pacific looks endless, just blue, wind, and the kind of emptiness that makes human ambition feel ridiculous. Somewhere beneath that surface, deeper than light can reach, a Soviet submarine lay broken on the seafloor. Not a rumor, not a possibility. A real hull, a real grave, and a real strategic prize. If the United States could reach it, the payoff could rewrite the Cold War's balance of knowledge. Cryptographic equipment, torpedoes, engineering secrets, and perhaps the kind of documents that explain not just what your adversary has, but what your adversary believes. The problem was physics. The ocean does not forgive. The target was nearly 3 miles down. No diver could go. No conventional salvage ship could even dream of lifting it. And if Moscow ever suspected the attempt, the operation would die before it began. So the CIA did what it often does at the edge of the possible. It created a cover story so extravagant it looked like madness, built a ship that should not have been buildable, and launched one of the most audacious covert engineering operations in history. This is Project AZORIAN, America's secret hunt for a sunken Soviet submarine, and the extraordinary moment when espionage stopped being about shadows and became about steel. Part 1: The Submarine That Disappeared. In early 1968, the Cold War's underwater chessboard was crowded and tense. Soviet ballistic missile submarines were the crown jewels of deterrence, and their diesel-electric boats still prowled with a different mission set: intelligence collection, patrols, and presence. That spring, a Soviet submarine designated K-129 failed to return from patrol in the North Pacific. Something went wrong, catastrophically wrong. The exact cause remains debated. An internal explosion, a malfunction, a collision, an accident during missile handling. What is certain is that the boat sank and the Soviet Navy launched a search. They did not find it. The United States did. The reason was a different kind of military advantage: ears in the water. By the late 1960s, the U.S. had built a network of undersea listening systems designed to detect and classify Soviet submarines across vast distances. When K-129 went down, the ocean carried a signature, an acoustic event that could be triangulated. American analysts and naval intelligence used those signals, along with other sources, to narrow down an area of the Pacific. Then a U.S. submarine slipped into the region and confirmed the unimaginable. The wreck was there, resting on the seabed at a depth of roughly 16,500 feet. That confirmation created a new question, one that sounds insane until you remember how the Cold War worked. If we can find it, can we take it? Part 2: Why risk the impossible? To understand why the CIA would even attempt this, you have to think like a strategist in 1968. A Soviet submarine is not just a weapon. It's a library. Inside a boat like K-129, you might find codebooks and cryptographic machines, the kind used to secure naval communications. You might find firing procedures, targeting doctrine, patrol patterns, engineering designs, weapons components. Even damaged, even waterlogged, the remains could offer intelligence that no spy in a trench coat could steal from a locked room in Moscow. There was also a deeper motive: deterrence knowledge. In a nuclear standoff, knowing how the other side communicates and commands its forces can affect how you plan for escalation or how you prevent it. But the risks were enormous. Physically, the depth was brutal. Politically, if the Soviets discovered an American salvage operation in the open ocean, it could spark a diplomatic crisis. Or worse, ethically, it was a war grave. So the operation demanded something rare in government: alignment between intelligence ambition and engineering audacity, all wrapped inside a cover story good enough to survive scrutiny. Part 3: The cover that made it possible. The CIA needed a reason to build a ship that could do something no ship had done. They needed a story the press could repeat without laughing, and one that foreign intelligence services could investigate without immediately reaching the real conclusion. They found their cover in a name with global recognition: Howard Hughes. Hughes was a billionaire industrialist known for aviation, eccentricity, and projects so ambitious they sounded like fiction. If Howard Hughes announced he was building a gigantic ship for a bizarre deep-sea mining venture, people would roll their eyes and accept it. His reputation was the perfect camouflage. So the CIA, through a web of front companies and carefully compartmented contracts, partnered with entities associated with Hughes and created the public narrative. The Hughes Glomar Explorer would mine manganese nodules from the ocean floor, rare mineral deposits that were, at the time, a subject of real scientific and commercial interest. The cover had to be more than a press release. It had to withstand journalists, investors, maritime experts, and Soviet watchers. That meant the ship would actually be built publicly with a plausible industrial purpose. And it was. Part 4, Building the Impossible Ship. The Hughes Glomar Explorer was unlike anything on the sea. It needed a massive central opening, a moon pool, an interior bay open to the ocean, where equipment could be lowered and raised out of sight. It needed a dynamic positioning system to hold the ship steady over a fixed point in deep water, despite wind and waves, because a drift of even a few feet could snap a 3-mile-long lift system like a strand of thread. It needed a towering derrick and an industrial-scale lifting mechanism to handle lengths of pipe, one after another, like assembling a steel spine into the abyss. And it needed a device so extraordinary it sounded like a monster from mythology. Mechanical claw designed to descend to the seabed, grasp the wreck, and lift it carefully into the hidden chamber of the ship. The engineering challenges were staggering. Materials had to withstand tension, cold, and pressure. Systems had to operate flawlessly for weeks at sea. The ship had to look from the outside like a mining vessel, not a covert salvage platform. Thousands of people worked on pieces of the project without understanding the whole. That compartmentation was not paranoia. It was survival. The fewer who knew, the fewer who could leak. The CIA gave the operation its classified name, Project AZORIAN. Part 5, The Long Road to the Pacific. By 1974, the ship was ready. The mission would take it to a remote patch of ocean where the wreck lay waiting. The world would see a mining expedition. The CIA would see a one-shot chance at history. The Glomar Explorer sailed with a crew that included mariners, engineers, and specialists, some aware of the real mission, many not. The operation required a second component as well, a support barge called the Hughes Mining Barge, which carried equipment and helped with logistics. In the Pacific, away from land, AZORIAN entered its most fragile phase, execution under the eyes of the adversary. Soviet intelligence was not asleep. Soviet ships shadowed the Glomar Explorer during parts of its mission. They watched, questioned, circled, curious about what the Americans were doing in a place with no obvious reason to be. The cover story had to hold in real time, and it did barely, because the cover was not nothing. It was an actual industrial activity with cranes, pipes, and operations that looked like deep-sea work. Part 6. Reaching 3 miles down. The heart of AZORIAN was a vertical assembly line. Sections of pipe were lowered into the ocean, joined one by one, forming a long column, reaching down to the seabed. This was slow, methodical work. Each connection had to be secured, each length lowered with care. The deeper it went, the more the ocean tried to claim it. Tension mounted, weather shifted. The ship's positioning system fought to keep the vessel locked in place. At the bottom, the capture vehicle, often described as a claw or grappling device, was meant to secure the submarine wreck. If it failed, the mission would fail. This wasn't just engineering. It was a test of nerves. Months of secrecy, billions in modern dollars, and years of planning were now concentrated into the question of whether metal could hold under impossible strain. At last, the device reached K129, and then, incredibly, it began to lift. Part 7. The moment it broke. This is where the story turns from triumph to tragedy. As the wreck rose from the seabed, something went wrong. Accounts vary in the details, but the core is consistent across open historical treatments. During the lift, part of the submarine broke. Part Instead of a complete recovery, only a section of the vessel was brought up. The ocean, indifferent and immense, took the rest back. Even so, the recovered section mattered. It was brought into the Glomar Explorer's hidden moon pool, concealed from outside observation. Whatever Soviet ships might have been watching, they could not see what was now inside the hull of a mining vessel. What the CIA recovered remains partly classified even today. Public reporting and historical accounts indicate that the haul likely included some physical components of the submarine and the remains of Soviet sailors. Some sources suggest additional materials were recovered. Others caution that claims have been exaggerated over time. The CIA has acknowledged elements of the mission indirectly through later declassifications. And the famous legal phrase that emerged when journalists tried to force details into the open, "We can neither confirm nor deny." That phrase became known as the Glomar response, named after the ship at the center of this story. Part 8. The Buried Human Cost. One of the most haunting aspects of Project AZORIAN isn't technical. It's human. When the recovered section came aboard, it contained the remains of Soviet crew members. The CIA and Navy faced a profound ethical reality. They had disturbed a war grave. In later years, the U.S. government released a portion of a video showing a burial at sea, conducted for recovered Soviet sailors. The ceremony was performed with military respect. The sailors were placed into the ocean with words that recognized them as men who served their country. It's a moment that collapses propaganda into humanity. The Cold War taught nations to see enemies as abstractions. The ocean does not. Part 9. The leak that changed everything. AZORIAN might have remained an obscure secret for decades. Another classified legend, whispered in secure hallways, if not for the thing no covert operation can fully control: the press. In 1975, elements of the story began to surface. The details were incomplete, sometimes wrong, but the core idea emerged. The United States had attempted to recover a Soviet submarine from the deep ocean. Journalists pursued it. The government refused to confirm. Lawsuits followed. And in responding, the CIA coined the now famous language of denial. The Glomar response was more than a line. It was a new legal posture for the modern secrecy state. It acknowledged that sometimes the act of confirming or denying is itself classified. The leak did something else, too. It ended any realistic chance of repeating AZORIAN at the same scale. Whatever future salvage dreams existed would now be seen through a lens of suspicion. Part 10. What AZORIAN really proved. Project AZORIAN is often remembered as a heist story, a Cold War thriller in steel. But that's not the deepest truth of it. AZORIAN proved that espionage isn't confined to embassies and alleyways. It can be industrial, can be oceanic. It can require shipyards and billionaires and cover stories that run for years. It also proved something about the Cold War mindset. Both sides believed that information was worth almost any risk, not because they loved danger, but because they feared ignorance more. And it revealed a paradox that still defines intelligence operations today. The more ambitious the operation, the more people it takes to execute, and the more fragile secrecy becomes. Compartmentation can hide a mission from adversaries, but it can't hide it from physics, and it can't hide it forever from history. Part 11. The Legacy from the Seafloor to the Modern World. The Glomar Explorer didn't disappear after AZORIAN. Continued in various roles. The technology pioneered for dynamic positioning and deep-sea operations fed into the broader world of offshore drilling, ocean engineering, and maritime industry. That's how covert work often echoes. Innovations built for secrets become tools for commerce. The Glomar response became a standard piece of the intelligence community's legal toolkit, cited in countless cases where secrecy itself is treated as a protected asset. And the story of K-129 became a reminder that the Cold War was not only fought at borders, was fought beneath the ocean, where submarines moved in silence and accidents could become mysteries for decades. There's also the matter of what we still don't know. The precise contents of what was recovered. remain disputed. The full operational record remains classified. That absence is frustrating. But it's also part of what makes Azorian the kind of story intelligence services both hate and admire. It's too bold to ignore and too sensitive to fully confess. Epilogue. The ocean keeps its secrets. If you strip away the machinery and the myth, Project AZORIAN is a story about limits. It is the story of a government daring to challenge physics in order to reduce strategic uncertainty. It is the story of a cover so large it looked like insanity, and therefore worked. It is the story of engineers asking the ocean for permission and the ocean answering only partially. And it is the story of men who died in a contest they didn't choose, remembered for a moment, by the very rival that tried to take their secrets. Somewhere beneath the Pacific, what remains of K-129 still rests in darkness, beyond reach, beyond politics, beyond the slogans that once justified everything. The Cold War is over, but the sea doesn't care. It holds what it holds, and it gives back only what it wants. And maybe that is the final lesson of Azorian. In the race to know everything about your enemy, you eventually collide with a force that cannot be bribed, threatened, or persuaded, only respected.